Right, we're recording. So yeah, welcome today. My name's Mike, and I'm a careers and employability consultant. We've got Tasha, part of Beckett Careers team, as well here today. She's going to keep an eye on the chat for you. And what we're going to talk about today, it's all about understanding the graduate labour market as it is currently. So how has it been affected by COVID-19? Where are the graduate opportunities? And what can you do now to prepare yourself for the graduate labour market as it is? So just a couple of quick housekeeping points. I've already mentioned it before we started, but just, yeah, keep your, for now, your microphone and video off. But please do use the chat bar, the conversation tab, put any questions in there, and there's time for questions at the end, so we'll definitely love to hear your thoughts, and we'll go through those at the end. And as I said, it will be recorded. We're recording now, so we can use it as a resource for you guys in the future and for other students as well. So what are we going to cover today? What I'm going to do is talk about how the graduate labour market looked about 1 month into lockdown. The reason that we'll do that is because that's the sort of first point where we had some data to assess and have a look at about 1 month in. There's some key stats and findings that we've got overall and the sort of viewpoint of the graduate labour market. So we'll go through that. We'll have a little look at how it looks now. And then we've got some thoughts from employers on how they've reacted, what changes they've made, particularly in regards to the recruitment process there. And then we'll go into a little bit more depth about what this means for you guys, how you can prepare for the next step of your career. And then also, just like there is, things that are going on today and the rest of this week, throughout the rest of the summer, we'll just go over what support is available to you that we are putting on here at Leeds Beckett as part of the Beckett Careers team. And I thought it'd be a good thing to do as well, just to show you some people that are hiring now as well, just to show you that yes, there are jobs out there and there are things available for you to apply for. And then, as I said, there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So please do pop them in the conversation bar. So 1 month in, what did the graduate labour market look like? To be honest, it didn't look great. Just being completely honest. Obviously, the effects of coronavirus, COVID-19, did cause an awful lot of, I suppose, damage to it, and hiring was significantly down. But it hadn't ceased entirely, as many people maybe expected. Obviously, there were some industries that had a huge increase in hiring, but it wasn't completely down. There was a 44% reduction actually in job postings from the same time in the previous year. So while that is obviously significant, there was evidence to suggest that the labour market was going to be able to rebound, because it was a large reduction, but it was almost manageable. And the point near the bottom as well there, it was more non-graduate positions that were bearing the brunt of the challenges. But so I'll just talk about, there was a really clear difference between larger and smaller employers on how they could cope with the challenges of COVID-19. Larger employers tend to have been around for longer because that's why they've managed to get to that size. So they've been through different challenges before and are experienced in dealing with them. They tend to have larger cash reserves as well, which means that they're again able to cope with this kind of thing. Whereas with smaller employers, sometimes these are just startups, so they don't have an awful lot of experience trading. They do have smaller cash reserves, and they therefore found it a lot more challenging. So in small to medium enterprise, recruitment was almost entirely on hold. They were in sort of survival mode, you could say. They were just trying to hold the business together, adapt to moving online, and make sure that they could continue to operate in some format. It was more SMEs that took advantage of the government's furlough scheme when that came in, which was again around about a month or just under a month into lockdown. But this is when staff were starting to become furloughed. So the SME picture was very much one of survival as opposed to expansion and things like that, which is understandable. And as I mentioned, it was largely, though, the non-graduate positions that were bearing the brunt of the challenges in industries like hospitality, retail, beauty. As you can imagine, some of those industries we're now over 3 months into lockdown, and they're only just about to get back underway properly as of this weekend, especially in hospitality and beauty. Retail came back a couple of weeks ago, but under very different circumstances. So it's this type of area where it was more difficult for people to work remotely. So that's why there was a lot more challenges there, as opposed to some of the more professional jobs that you would see at a graduate level. And what we found as well with graduate recruiters a month into lockdown, they were reacting cautiously and avoiding panic. So about a month into lockdown, we didn't see a huge sort of raft of graduate recruitment drives being cancelled. A lot were put on hold, understandably, but not many were cancelled completely. So it was almost like the graduate recruiters, the larger employers, were starting to think, well, okay, let's see how this goes for the next couple of months. We don't want to cancel things entirely. Graduates are, often they're seen as, understandably the future of the business. They want to get new people into the business, so they really didn't want to be cancelling recruitment drives if at all possible. So there was no panic, across the board. There wasn't any panic. It was just, let's see how things go, which is great news actually, because we'll see some of the effects of that later in the slides. But some of the key things that were found were, for one, we're in what's called a V-shaped recession, which indicates that the economy can rebound. So when they say a V-shaped recession, it means it's going to be quite deep and challenging, but we can rebound from it. It's not going to be a long sort of state of challenge, because this recession as well was almost in some ways not self-inflicted, but it was the government decided to do it because the risk to public health was greater. Whereas if you look at previous recessions, financial crashes and things like that, there was never a decision made. It was something that just happened and the government had to rebound. Whereas in this case, the government made the decision to to go into lockdown. They knew the economy would struggle, but they had plans to bring us out of that, which we're starting to see now. And as a result of this, we expect that there'll be an overall drop in graduate recruitment numbers of about 12%. So obviously that's a significant number. That means it is going to be more challenging. But if you compare it to the 2008 crash, which was the last sort of significant recession, that was more like 25%. And like I said before, there wasn't really a plan to get out of that. It was much more having to react and try and deal with that. Whereas now, I think with that 12% figure, I think that is probably a good sort of number. It means, yes, it'll be more difficult, but it's certainly not going to be hopeless as may have been thought originally. And there's just a graph here as well. I hope everyone can see that. Some different areas, some specific sectors, and how that's been affected, how they've been affected individually. So a key one to look at, built environment is an obvious one. I don't know if we've got anyone from sort of built environment courses here today, but there is a significant drop in graduates there. But again, I think there will be, that number should change as the economy starts to move again and people start to to get back with construction projects that were happening. But even in that, you see that number there, it's the non-graduates that bore the brunt of that significant change. And if you just look at places like charity and public sector, whilst I think this is an interesting one, because whilst the non-graduates took a huge hit, the actual graduates are only down by about 1%. And what that means is it just illustrates the point that I mentioned before, that companies, organisations in the public sector, they are really keen to keep bringing graduates into their business, because they see them as the future leaders. They're going to solve the issues. They're going to be better equipped to deal with if we have to deal with something like this in the future. So they've really tried to hold that graduate recruitment there. Financial professional services is sort of about, at the average for the graduate market in total. I think legal is a good one to point out there as well. If we've got anyone from law, it's down slightly, but I personally think that the reason for it being only sort of 4% and below the average is probably because it takes quite a long time. It takes a couple of years to qualify as a solicitor, so they can plan further ahead and think that we'll get through this. I want to just talk about the column on the right as well, in case we've got anyone here on, from level 5, maybe thinking about a placement next year. I think there's no way to kind of sort of sugarcoat this. It is going to be more difficult to get a placement, because what a lot of graduate employers do with placement years is that they put them in place to see if students will complete their placement year, finish their degree, and then come back as a graduate later on. And it's a good thing to do for large organisations to build that pipeline. But I think that in this situation, if they've seen graduate recruitment and placements, can we keep both? They might have made the changes to placements to sort of tighten the belts in some ways there. That's not to say that they're going to be gone completely, and it's certainly not to say that that situation and picture won't improve over time as we know more. But I think it is important to say that it will be a little bit more difficult for placements. And things like summer internships are also sort of harder to find at the moment, but they are still out there as well. So a little sort of word on how things are looking now. And as lockdown eases, we are starting to see improvement in the sectors that have been able to get back to work. We are still a long way from the labour market position we had in February, but there is certainly improvement. And job postings are up. I think it was about 144% up from where we were at the start of lockdown, again from Indeed and Adzuma. So there's definitely some increase, and we are getting back to some almost normal levels. Again, though, with SMEs, they are still in survival mode and have little prospect of recruiting at the moment. So I think what we might see in terms of the usual, if you like, graduate recruitment timeline, where you would have big graduate schemes recruiting in the autumn, offering positions for the summer, and then you would have more SMEs recruiting sort of more in the spring, because they were almost trying to get graduates straight out of uni. I think what you will see is that being that changing to adapt to the market. Basically, I think we will see SMEs starting to recruit more, maybe around the autumn and Christmas and time, things like that, because now is probably the time that they would have been recruiting, but obviously it's really difficult for them at the moment. So I think we will see that change. We don't have any data on that at the moment, but my personal opinion is that I think that as SMEs get through, lockdown eases, things start to get back to normal a little bit, we will start to see them recruit a little bit more, because also one thing that this lockdown will have shown as well is that it could be cheaper or more cost effective to recruit students and graduates because of this new normal that we hear of working remotely and working from home. So they don't have to think about office space as much. They could, have more people working remotely. So they may think that may increase the numbers, or certainly they may be able to recruit graduates for more cost effectively than maybe they previously would have been able to before all this happened. So yeah, just again a mention on the non-graduate positions. They continue to be worse affected than graduate positions. There hasn't been any change there, and again I think you would expect to see that. Again, some of those industries we mentioned, retail, hospitality, they are still sort of struggling a little bit with those positions. I think one of the things that, from a student's point of view, though, that would be sort of apt to think about here is that a lot of those positions tend to be the types of jobs that students might do while they're studying. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But hopefully we'll see that position improve as lockdown gets underway. This weekend, I think we'll say a lot, especially when the hospitality industry gets underway again. And then this is where we are now as well. So this data was taken on the 24th of June. This graph at the bottom, which shows that a lot of employers, graduate employers, are still unsure about their decision. So they're still yet to make a firm decision. And they are, I think, about just 38%, that is, that they still don't know what they're going to do with their recruitment. I think it's about 12% there that we mentioned recruit less. Well, it's 15%, but then with the recruit more, it averages out to about 12%. And that's 35% that are just going to stay the same. They're just going to hold as they were. So that's a positive picture there. But I also think that we shouldn't assume that the labour market will be this way all year. So it could improve again. I think a lot of these don't know employers, the ones in that column, will start to think about, they'll start to think, right, what are we doing? Are we staying the same? Are we recruiting more? Because this is a rapidly changing picture, basically. Things will change probably month to month. So like I've mentioned before, it's slightly damaged. Well, it is damaged, but it's certainly not hopeless. And hopefully some of the stats that we've seen there evidence that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what employers are saying and how they're adapting to the changes, particularly in terms of online recruitment. So a lot of the recruitment that is still going on, over 90% of it, is now understandably being moved online. So I think a couple of the things to think about here are that they are using things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams that we're using today, Google Hangouts, things like that. But I think that it's important to remember that there will still be sort of full assessment centres run virtually. It's not just a sort of video interview. They are still going through with group tasks, group presentations, things like that. So one of the things that I would say is, as you're doing today, get yourself familiar with things like Teams, Zoom, get used to sort of being in those sort of formal group chats on those platforms. And there is a concern about students and graduates that maybe don't have access to good digital technologies. But a lot of the employers that I'm speaking to are trying to mitigate for that as much as possible. So as an example, if they are holding virtual assessment centres, they are hosting a sort of trial run the day before for students to make sure that, to iron out if they have any issues with their technology. They are being understanding as well about people working from home and the different situations that people may have, noisy households, little brothers and sisters, dogs barking, things like that, which is always an issue in my house. So they are understanding that these aren't normal times. So there is a little bit of sort of consideration and understanding for that. So hopefully that will put your mind at rest a little bit. I've talked a little bit about internships and placements. Yeah, they are, a lot of the summer things have been postponed or cancelled for now, but where possible, as many employers are trying to move them online or offer an alternative online experience. So it might not be the full sort of internship that you may receive, but it might be some mentoring sessions with a person from the company as well. So I don't want to put you off from looking for those things. I certainly don't, because I think it's a great thing to be doing at the moment. So, but they may just be slightly different in format than they would have been before. If anyone has an offer previously that they may have received earlier in the year for a start date, maybe around September, some employees are trying to sort of engage with keep warm activities, as they call them, to try and make sure that you are engaged. It may be that the start date has been deferred slightly, but they will still keep in touch with you as much as possible. So again, it's slightly, it's unusual, but it's not a sort of a hopeless situation in terms of they will keep in contact with you. They want you to start if at all possible, because they've obviously given you that assurance from the recruitment process that you've gone through this and the assessment and selection. So it is just a case of being a little bit patient sometimes in those situations, I think. We've talked a little bit about the hiring, but as we mentioned, a lot are on paused recruitment. And I think that's an important point underneath there, where it says, you know, where current staff have been furloughed, they may wait to see from those to come back, and then they'll make their decision on whether they can recruit or not. So we've talked about some of them have revised graduate numbers, but a lot are still working to their existing number plans. And I think we saw there was a good 35%. And when you think that nearly 40% are still unsure, 35% still operating to the same plans, I would say that's a really positive number. And then we've talked as well about induction and development. There is a chance that start dates may be delayed into the next year. A couple of employees that I know have delayed start dates from September to January. That may change if the market improves, but I think that is one thing to be prepared for if you've got an offer already, that your induction, your start date may differ slightly. So what does it all really mean in terms, for yourselves? And I've mentioned it, I have covered it. There's no escaping that it is a challenging time to graduate from university this year. Probably one of the most challenging years in the last, probably since sort of 2008-9. But it's certainly not hopeless. And, I've mentioned there are opportunities out there for graduate students and graduates who have prepared in the right way. So what do I mean by preparing in the right way? Certainly be flexible and your options will increase. 86% of graduate employers do not recruit by specific degree subject. So really what that means is that you may have thought of a quite sort of linear career path to do with your degree subject before, and might have thought that there's only certain jobs that I can do because of my degree. Well, 86% of graduate employers, they don't specify what degree they want. So, for example, I've heard of, we've got students from humanities that are now working in digital and tech. We've got students that have studied history and English doing marketing. There's your degree subject certainly doesn't rule you out of anything. Obviously, there are some caveats to that, things like quite often law, built environments, but a lot of the sort of the things that we mentioned like I say, 86% of employers just want to see that you've completed a degree. So that's a good way to prepare, by looking at your different options and exploring what is available to you. But also use this time to develop your networks and improve your employability through online learning. So joining things like this today is definitely helpful. All of the other things that have gone on this week and our Beyond Beckett series of events still to continue the rest of the day and tomorrow and Friday. So things like that, but also there are things like online mentoring programs. A lot of graduate employers are putting on webinars for people as well, for students specifically, to show them what's going on, what their plans are, what you could be doing. So there's a lot of things that you can do at this time, and also, pursuing things like voluntary work or short-term contracts. These are things that show an employer that you can thrive in these difficult circumstances. I think one of the first questions, in fact, I'm almost certain of it, the first question that employers are asking at a graduate assessment or interview is, what did you do during lockdown? How did you spend your time? What did you do in that circumstance to improve, to develop? So these are things that you need to think about that you could do during this time. So if you could say that you completed all these different online learning courses, maybe got a mentor and spoke with them and asked them different things, then you can show that you're being proactive, you're learning, you're developing, and you can talk about that in a future interview. I've mentioned getting comfortable with online assessments because they're pretty much exclusively online now. So just a small plug here as well, that we are conducting a virtual mock assessment centre on July the 16th. So that's available to book on MyHub now. We can pop a link into the chat maybe before we finish. So essentially, what we do as a careers team, we always put on around this time of year, and throughout the year, actually, we put on mock assessment centres for any students that are, have a graduate selection process and assessment centre coming up. So we'll go through maybe a presentation task and a group task, and then do like a mock interview with you. So obviously, to reflect what's going on now in the labour market, we've moved these online, where we will do very similar events, and it's a good chance. I mentioned before that in an online assessment centre, you will have to still take part in like a group assessment and a group task. It's a good chance to practice doing that in what we hope is a supportive environment with ourselves and careers advisors, to hopefully improve your confidence and your capability in not just the actual tasks, but completing them in this format. And then I just wanted to mention a brief sort of word on postgraduate study, because I think there's understandably there's data to suggest that universities are expecting high numbers of postgraduate applications as people start to think about their options. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with pursuing postgraduate study if it's part of a clear career path. But I think if there's not a clear career path, and you just think, oh well, this might make me more employable while I wait to do work for something else, I think most employers that we speak to, and across the board, are quite ambivalent towards a postgraduate degree on a CV at this stage. I think that they would prefer to see that you have some experience of any sort, part-time job, extracurricular, voluntary, any of those types of things. I think they prefer to see that along with your undergraduate degree as being more employable. So that was just a word on that. But like I said, some postgraduate study takes you down a very clear career path. I mean, I'm thinking law, for example. You need to do the LPC to become a solicitor. So that's that. But if like I say, be a clear career path, and you can always speak to us as well if you want to talk about that in more detail and specifically what it means for you. We're here to discuss that with you and hopefully help out. So I just wanted to put this quote in. A lot of the data that we've got from that I've got in this presentation is from the Institute of Student Employers, and this is their chief executive. So he's just, and I think this sort of sums things up a little bit, and it just says, as the world teeters on its axis, it's easy to forget that the economy could rebound relatively quickly and the jobs market will recover. So in the face of so much uncertainty, it might be tempting for students to bury heads under the duvet and assume recruiters have stopped recruiting. But these are the students whose career will suffer the greatest downturn. And I think that sums things up really nicely, because, whilst there are difficulties in the economy and the labour market at the moment, it really could rebound quite quickly. We've talked about that V-shaped recession, and it's the students that do the things that we've mentioned in terms of the online learning, the improvement, the learning and development, the building the networks. They'll be the ones best prepared for when the economy does rebound, and they will be ahead in the I was going to call it a race. Yeah, I suppose it is a race, really. You'll be ahead in the race. So I think that sums up things quite nicely. And obviously, you guys coming on this today, learning more. I'm sure you'll have done some other things at Beyond Beckett, some of the other sessions as well. So that's exactly the type of thing that is the correct thing to be doing. So I just wanted to put that quote in there to emphasise that, really. So what are we doing at Leeds Beckett? So obviously we've got the rest of the Beyond Beckett week. So tomorrow there's a lot of stuff on CV writing, interview and assessment tips. We've got some tips on assessment centres that we're doing, and I think interviews and the STAR technique as well. If you haven't heard of that, it's something that's really important to know for preparing for a graduate interview. We've got careers in accountancy and finance, advice on career students pursuing film as a career. So a lot of variation, a lot of things going on tomorrow. And then on Friday, it's a slightly different approach. It's sort of take action, book a careers appointment, and start to discuss maybe in a little bit more detail what your career planning is. So there's appointments available all through Friday. I've mentioned that we've got our virtual mock assessment centre coming up on July the 16th. Really hope to see some of you there, because it is an opportunity to practice and get a graduate selection process and get used to the online format. So we're running mentoring programs in key graduate sectors. So we've launched one in marketing. We're looking to launch things in digital, finance, possibly recruitment as well. We will be continuing to run them across the summer. As we across the summer as well, we'll still be hosting like webinars, everything that you've sort of experienced during this week at Beyond Beckett. We are going to continue that through July, August, and September before we start into the next academic year. So there's plenty of support available to you as we move into the semester, next academic year. We will be running things like our Get Hired sessions, which take you through each individual part of the graduate recruitment process. So things like psychometric testing, again, assessment centres, interviews, and then we're also hosting some like masterclasses, which cover things that are really useful for that process and preparing things like commercial awareness, presentation skills, personal branding, those types of things as well. So look out for those, because they're again are things that are there to help you prepare for your graduate selection. We will be running this is just a picture of our careers fair on the right there. That's how busy it was in October last year. That is not going to happen, unfortunately, but we will still be running it virtually in October. and there's our graduate and careers fair. We also have a part-time jobs fair in September around induction week. So we're hoping to have a similar number of employees, probably more so, on a virtual format where you can speak to employees, see promotional videos, and make contact with them there for graduate positions. And I think as well, one of the differences that might happen there as well is, whereas a lot of the time the graduate and placements fair in October is for big schemes, graduate schemes where the start dates would be till the following summer, you might find that there are some employees that have come out of the sort of recession and have more immediate hiring needs. So hopefully we get some of those employees in, and I think that's a good time to mention the point that if you are in your final year now, and you get to the September, if you have graduated, there's still plenty of support available. You can come and access our support for up to 5 years after you've graduated. So please do keep in touch. We are here to continue to support you if you were a graduate as well as a student. And then I wanted to mention about careers appointments. We are available all throughout the summer. You can book appointments on MyHub. You can speak to one of us, myself and my colleagues. We can talk about, if you've got a graduate position to prepare for, maybe you've got an interview coming up, we can talk about that. We can talk about your CV, cover letter. We can talk about where to find different graduate jobs. We can talk about postgraduate study and applications for postgraduate study. And we can, if you've got no idea about any of that and you don't know where to start, we can help you with that as well. So please do get in touch with us. We've got appointments available, all throughout the summer. So, obviously conducted by phone. But and yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We're here to help, basically. And then I just wanted to put a final slide up just to say that there are people, graduate recruiters looking for people right now, looking for graduates right now. So, and I've tried to just sort of go by sector a little bit there. So if you're interested in recruitment or executive search, we've got positions with OAM Associates and G&E Partners, 2 employers that have done a lot of work with us over the last year. If you are interested in either of those, those positions are on MyHub as well. I spoke to Oliver from OAM Associates yesterday, who said it, for every position that graduate students get in touch with him about, he's usually got 2 or 3 more to talk to them about as well. They're coming in all the time for him. He's placed 11 students during lockdown, so his clients are still continuing to recruit. So if you're interested in that, it's definitely worth having a look at that on MyHub. And digital, training software developers, you don't need to have studied a computing degree for that. You get all the training. They're a really great company as well, so they're still continuing to hire. And Graph Talent, they're an agency that works specifically for graduates. Graft means graduate recruitment and future talent. So it's a great acronym, but that specifically focusing on graduates. They've got a lot of tech roles at the moment. Similarly with FDM, they continue to take on graduates in both business consultancy and technology roles. Again, that's on MyHub at the moment. And then there's a couple of others there from various roles. NHS Digital, Aldi, their graduate area manager program is going to continue to run. People like Leeds City College, they've got a load of roles on there at the moment, and then William Hill's graduate in programs on there in technology and finance as well. So I hope that's helpful. There's loads more on MyHub. Please go onto MyHub and check it out. And if you have any questions as well, please do get in touch with us. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Our Twitter and Instagram handle is @Beckett Careers, so please do follow us. And we put a lot of our content on there. We've got a lot of things that you'll find out about the different events that we've got going on over the summer. And yeah, I think if we go for questions and things first, and then maybe we can talk about any feedback just before we wrap up. So I don't know if we've got any questions in the bar. Well, so I'm just going to check any. Hopefully you can all see that conversation bar. If anyone got any questions about anything that we've covered today? Okay, well, okay, so what would be the one top tip that you'd give to students to set them apart in such competitive times? Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's definitely sort of going out there and spending this time by being proactive, building networks, reaching out to employers, using LinkedIn potentially to speak to people in the industry that you're interested in working for. Definitely looking at online resources that graduate employers are putting on, because again, you'll not only learn things from that, you'll definitely be able to speak about that in the future as well. Again, another thing, there's a lot of voluntary things out there that you can explore, and if you do things like that, again, it gives you something to talk about when you are in your graduate interview, but also you'll learn some really good skills from it. If you're doing voluntary work for things like charities at the moment, obviously there was a big NHS drive. If you've done something like that, it's a great thing to be involved in. You'll learn some great skills, and then you can talk about that. So there's another question here. So where would I say the best places to look for jobs at the moment? So obviously, the main ones that you see are Indeed and Reed, but I always think that they are saturated with applications. So I would, there's certainly there are some things in there, but you just have to be aware that there's a lot of competition there. I would look at, definitely MyHub would be somewhere that I would say, there's loads of things that we put on there. That is where employers have come to us saying that they want to advertise these positions to Leeds Beckett students. So MyHub's definitely a good port of call. A lot of employers are now using LinkedIn as their only way of advertising roles in terms of the job section on LinkedIn. But I would also just follow people that you're interested in working with, because quite often they will go on LinkedIn first. You can send them a message and then put yourself, in the minds of that recruiter. And also, following companies that you want to work for on things like Instagram and Twitter. Quite often that's where they put positions up first. They don't always go to the job boards. So definitely using MyHub, using social media in a more sort of creative way to do that, and definitely using sort of your networks on LinkedIn as well. So a question from Neil here: are there many employers that offer relocation help or have accommodation for the working week? I'll be honest, if that's not something that I've sort of really come across at the moment. I think what I would say is more employers are now open to, or much more open to, a remote working, and having that as more of the sort of normal situation. So it may be that travel to work, a commute, may happen maybe only about 20% of the time, whereas it might have happened 100% of the time. They are looking to keep people at, if possible, they're seeing the benefits basically of staff working from home. I think I think it was about 90% of employers that were surveyed said that working remotely has gone better than they expected. Sort of 2 or 3 months into lockdown. So I think that the idea of maybe needing to relocate, or maybe not needing to relocate, but needing to be very close to, in a really commutable distance to the office, is going to be something that changes slightly. I think there's going to be less importance put on how close you are to the office and just can you do your job from home. I hope that's answered the question there. Any more questions from anyone? Yeah, thanks, Neil. Any more questions from anyone, or things that we want to ask, want to talk about? Okay, if there isn't, what I'll do is I'll stop recording, and then what we can do is, we are going to use this as a resource. We'll have the interview list, attendance list, and I'll drop you all an email if there's anything you want to get in touch with us about, maybe afterwards. Actually, I'll just put my email in here now. That's probably a better idea. mhall@leedsbeckett.ac.uk. So if anyone wants to catch up with me afterwards, please do get in touch. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed that. Okay.
I was just going to add a quick one. If anyone else has got any other sessions today that they're hoping to get onto, obviously there has been some issues with MyHub. The IT team are aware and they're working on getting it fixed. But if you have any trouble accessing any links, or you can't get onto any sessions, please just drop either me or Mike. So you've got Mike's email address, m.hall@leedsbeckett.ac.uk, or mine is t.plumb, plumb, @leedsbeckett.ac.uk, or even on social media, just to let us know that you can't get on, and we'll try and get that sorted for you and get you in.